Howdy y'all and hello all. Welcome back to O State All Day. If you've had the opportunity to take a peek at my last couple videos, obviously my focus has been the recruiting aspect and how it has a direct implication at Oklahoma State University compared to how other colleges decided to go about it. What I mean by that is I think it's fairly common knowledge, or at least a common consensus, that when this whole NIL stuff started kicking off, that if it didn't have bumpers on it, that it could end up getting a little wild, which I think it has. But at the same time, if it's technically in the rule book to do, or there's nothing that really says you can't, if you have the money to do so, it's hard to fault that, right? But only a couple handful of schools are going to be able to afford the type of money that has been rumored to be going to some of these 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. Obviously, when they're in their high school and they're 17, they may not get the money until they're 18, I get that, but you understand my point. The NCAA, due to what I think is some credibility issues they've been facing the last few years, because they clearly don't have the same level of punishment that is equal. So for some odd reason, they tend to punish those who are more cooperative than others. Why is that? Who knows? Maybe there's an axe to grind, maybe not, but they're obviously not very transparent, and they don't have a consistent set of guidelines, it appears, that they continuously go by. So without the NCAA having the ability to add bumpers, you knew it was going to get a little crazy. It supposedly has gotten a little crazy. Well, so what do you do if you're a college or a university like Oklahoma State? Yes, you've been successful enough over the last decade to 15 years that you're able to carry your own weight from a financial perspective. But you're still obviously not a blue blood, and you've stubbed your toe so often when it comes to winning the Big 12 title that's one of the major things people go to. And you can't really combat that either because they're not entirely inaccurate. Now, from a wins perspective, yes, right? We carry a lot of weight. If you look at the win totals, especially Gundy's, whether you love him, like him, leave him, don't care, he's done a lot, and the last couple of years he's been a little bit different. So again, what do you do if you're a university that's not going to be able to fork over a crud ton of money? Here's where we separate ourselves from a lot of other places in my eyes. We've been viewing it different for quite some time. So Gundy had to build this thing realistically from the ground up. Les Miles was able to get us some talent and some hard-nosed individuals, but at the same time, Gundy had to kind of find a way to formulate it into what he wanted to do. And as it kind of took a foothold, he's been very consistent. That's the biggest thing about him. For his lack of conference titles, his ability to be consistent has literally led that teeter-totter to be able to even itself out. And we're turning the corner a little bit more. But the way we've done it is based off of people. Not stars, not touchdowns, not stats, not what position, but primarily people. And the kind of old adage growing up to some degree was, if you find something you're really good at some point in time, you've got to absolutely focus on that if it's your best course of success. I.e., at one point in time in high school, I had to give up baseball because going to college in baseball was probably not going to happen. Going to college for track and to some degree football was a possibility, so I did have to stop and focus on that. Gundy likes to see a multi-sport athlete. So if you can do a multitude of things, and like, for instance, if you have a player that you want him to play safety, and this has just happened in the last couple of years, and he currently plays quarterback. Well, if he doesn't pass all over the yard, maybe he doesn't get the scouting as a quarterback. And we have the ability to kind of see that above other places. Well, that guy ends up being a 3-star, 4-star, then ends up getting drafted. So that's been our key to success. And I think it's accidentally allowed us to be in this box almost by ourselves. Obviously, there's going to be other colleges that follow the same blueprint that are capable of doing the same thing. I think one of them, to a little lesser degree, but already consistent, is Texas Tech. The program they have going, I think, is pretty cool. Obviously, we have something similar, or else we'd be dead in the mud. But we're going to be able to provide enough that if you're coming for the right reasons, to do the right things, and be around the right people, that you get all that you need plus some. You get the body by glass. And so it's almost like you're paying for your route to professionalism. And that's 100% true because you see it in the SEC all the time. The common consensus is that if you're a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit stronger than everybody else, and it's all combined, then you go to the front lines of the SEC. That's your quickest way into the NFL. But if you look at the depth that we have at the moment, especially on the defensive line, that's a defensive line that's going to be able to rock and roll with, I think, anybody in the country, definitely from a depth perspective. If you don't know, I think this Saturday, aka tomorrow, we're going to have a little bit better idea of what we have. I think it's very evident that we've been pretty reserved, kept things close to the vest when it comes to play calling from a defense perspective. So tomorrow should be the day that we get to see a little bit of a different side of Derek Mason. Maybe a lot of twists, maybe a lot of stunts, maybe a lot of shooting people in and out of spaces, maybe doing all stand-up defensive line and shifting from man to zone and quarters to cover, different kinds of coverages. That could very well be what happens. I hope that's what happens, because in the offseason, they were toying with a lot of things. And if we didn't have the depth, we wouldn't be able to do so. And Mason has been coaching for a very long time. He knows the difference between having a VW Beetle and a potential Ferrari. So I think that we should trust that. I also think that the competition we've had thus far has enabled us to not have to let a lot out of the bag. Is that potentially a two-headed coin? It is, because we also haven't been on the road, and we darn sure haven't been on the road in an environment in Waco against the team that a lot of people had coming into the season as the top team. So I think that our defensive line specifically is going to be able to do a little bit more. They know that they got to do something fairly creative due to the tendency for teams lately to try to exploit that 3 to 4 second window. What I mean by that is if our D-line gets you within 3 seconds and you're holding the ball still, that's a good sign for us. Our secondary has been a little bit of a question mark. Hopefully, there's some not only learning curves they had to adjust to, but also a little bit of possum. And if that's the case, I do expect the D to have a very big day. So I think we're all pretty pumped for Saturday. It's going to be fun. And while I'm here, I wanted to drop a minor nugget and let you guys know that, especially all of you who've been rocking and rolling the whole 14 days, 13 days, something to that effect, that I decided to get this thing going. It's already been a lot of fun. I've already had a lot of opportunities, I think, in the horizons to keep growing and keep making more content and make it better content. So I don't think there's a lot that I can divulge at the moment, so I'm not going to jump too far into it. But again, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's been rocking with me the last couple weeks. It's been a blessing to be able to have a major opportunity this quickly. So guys, stay tuned, and we're gonna keep this thing going. But I did want to throw out, I don't know precisely what that means when it comes to the exact science per se of this channel. But what I will say is the reason I started all this, for the most part, was opportunities. I wanted the opportunity to grow the knowledge of the University of Oklahoma State. I'm not confusing it. I understand it's Oklahoma State University, but you get what I'm saying. So originally it was based off of the historical side of things. So with that in mind, and how much I've kind of already covered Baylor, I've covered some of the basketball, I've covered some of the Jordy Mercer stuff. I'm going to put a baseball package together pretty soon. But the focus has got to be the focus. And the focus originally was catching up everybody on how this whole thing got going. For example, the state of Oklahoma, when it was formerly known as Indian Territory, the original crop basically created by the Choctaw Indians in Oklahoma was King Cotton in 1825. From 1825 to 1862, we produced a large portion of the cotton for the region in Oklahoma before it was Oklahoma. And in 1862, these things called boll weevils, like bugs, migrated up from Mexico, Texas, up through Oklahoma, and they destroyed all these crops, right? After that time, they knew that they needed a lot more teachers and surgeons and doctors and lawyers and people of that educated ilk. Well, that's basically how OU kind of got its beginnings. But for us specifically, it was something that a professor by the name of Seaman Knapp, who was at Iowa State, he kind of, designed the idea of how to take care of a farm. From a planting perspective, what you should do to make sure the lands will work, and how deep you got to go, and how you keep pesticides to some degree, because they didn't have those back then, but you still had to find ways to combat the problems that you were running into. Well, it didn't really catch hold in the Oklahoma Territory, because it was Indian Territory for such a long time, for a while, which is why, it's a little bit behind the curve. But let's speed you up a little bit. Now you get to around the 1880s range. And the president knew, like Lincoln in the 1862 Moral Act, wanted everybody to be able to go to college. If you were willing to put in the time and the work in high school, you should have had the capability of going to college without going to be a doctor or a lawyer, so on and so forth, which is why Yale and Princeton's and the Harvards of the time and the West Points were so big, because, that was kind of the start of it all. So the matriculation of people from Ohio, Pennsylvania, so on and so forth, to Oklahoma to do some farming, didn't really know exactly how to do it and what to do. So this Professor Seaman Knapp set up these test farms in a little part of Texas, and they would teach people, okay, this is how you use the soil, this is what you plant, this is how deep you go, this is how many times you water it, all that good stuff. And eventually it got its way up to being called a land grant school, which means the federal government had this swath of land off of Louisiana Purchase stuff, and they were going to give these colleges or universities a specific type of functioning. And as long as they did this specific type of functioning, they could have basically the land. So that's how it got rocking and rolling, and then we obviously became Oklahoma Agricultural and Mechanical College. The Tigers. In the very beginning, we got a lot of ideas because we had a faculty member that was obviously very prominent at the time, whose father went to Princeton, and obviously their colors were orange and black. That's also where the idea for the Tigers came. We were designated by, I'm assuming, those faculty as the Princeton of the Prarie, which is where we got the Tigers moniker. It didn't clearly last a long time, because I think people realized that we don't have tigers in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, or still Indian Territory. Why would we be called the Tigers? So thankfully the orange and black stuck, because I love it, and I think it does set us apart a little bit from other places. So it's cool that we kept the colors and got rid of the tiger, right? But that's kind of how we got going. And then because we were focused on agricultural and mechanical, that's where the Aggies moniker comes. Texas Tech obviously still has carried that on, as well as New Mexico State. So some people kept the Aggies moniker primarily due to some of the military type of schooling they were going to get. I'll get into that a little bit later at a different time. But for now, we were started as a land grant university. This Dr. Seaman Knapp came to Oklahoma State, or Oklahoma Agricultural and Mechanical, to teach people how to farm. And what they did was they had these programs where they give kid seeds. So as a kid, they would teach you how to train for the ground and the watering and the growing. And so that way when you got up to college, you already have some sort of an idea of what to do and how to do it. So once you get there, it makes life a lot easier, and it makes our farming much more productive. So that's how we got started as a land-grant university around the same exact time. The University of Oklahoma, they originally were started off, if you've seen another one of the little videos, as the Norman Territorial University, Rough Riders and Boomers. I can get into that at a different time as well, but they got started October 19th of 1889. We got started December 25th, 1889. So we're both starting at the same time, but we really didn't have the same things going. And then as you escalate into time is when you learn why OU has a little bit of a big brother complex, and it's due to the fact that they were the first in a lot of things, especially for the Midwest South type of area, because there wasn't a lot of coverage in the Midwest or the South. A lot of your coverage, and that's reflective of like the Heisman voting and national championship voting for so long ago, was because the major publications and football was invented basically on the East Coast. So what was happening here was honestly a very, very new thing. OU actually had the first official coach, Vernon Parrington, and he did implement a lot of things that allowed the game of football to progress. A little bit later on, so the records indicate that the University of Oklahoma's very first game ever was against Oklahoma City High School. One classification I've read has it as a 64-0 loss. One classification I've seen has a 34-0 loss, but nonetheless, the first game ever was to a high school, which was not completely foreign because college ball was, again, extremely new. It was so barbaric that in 1906, Teddy Theodore Roosevelt, who was a massive football fan, almost had to put it into the game due to the amount of deaths that have been on the football field. So they had to start coming up with rules. One fun fact about the Bedlam rivalry was it was started by OU in 1897 when they came up with a chant. I'll find a way to make it come into these videos somehow in the very near future. But they lost to Oklahoma City High School, right? Well, our first Bedlam together, this is a true story, I've read it in multiple places, was there was a game between us and them, and our kicker, punter, punted the ball. It was a cold, windy day, and the punt actually went behind the Oklahoma agricultural mechanical guy, okay? And it was a mad scramble for the ball, which is, not completely different than when you see a mad scramble for a fumble. So there's this mad scramble for the ball, and it went into a creek, and getting it to the creek area without going in the creek, I guess originally was the touchdown designation for OU, but the ball went into the creek, right? And whoever got it could basically claim a touchdown, so they all jumped in the water, started scrumming. There was an OU guy who ended up being a very good swimmer. He swam out and got the football, got out of the creek, slammed it on the ground, claimed a touchdown. To score a touchdown for us, we had to go to the other side of the field across the street. There was no width, there was no yards. The touchdown was a creek and across the street, and they put it down as a 75-0 win with no rules, no sidelines, have a creek as a touchdown, a street basically is a touchdown. That's just how entry level it was back then, even before the leather helmet era. So it wasn't very widely viewed as something that was necessarily a good thing. There's also a story about OU, one of OU's first games ever in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, what used to be Kingfisher College, which is obviously no longer a thing, hasn't been for quite some time. They played a game there, and a sheriff showed up because of all the commotion. And the sheriff shows up, and he sees people fighting and tackling and people bleeding and so on and so forth. And he had to step in because he thought it was a massive brawl. Didn't know what football was. And rumor has it that the sheriff restarted the game by firing off a gun, which is obviously something that reverberates with our culture and our history and our mascot, how Pistol Pete came to be. I'll jump into all that at a later date, but I wanted to touch on that. I wanted to say thank you guys that have been rocking and rolling from the beginning a couple weeks ago. I know the numbers are small, but it's going to grow. It's going to get bigger. Opportunities are starting to happen for me that I thought, was going to be more of a dream scenario for a while. So be excited with me, be excited for me, be excited to keep going on this journey together. And my aim is just to grow the national landscape of knowledge for OSU, Oklahoma State University, because we've earned it. We deserve a seat, per se, at the Big Boy Club. And I think that if people knew the history of how we became, what we became, and the lineage that is overlooked often due to the lack of success for massive chunks of time, it'll allow people to have a bigger appreciation. And the more appreciation, I think, the better the product is going to be in the end. So please keep tuning in. Do me a favor, take some thrustation on the like, share, comment section. Help me grow this thing. And we'll just we'll keep rocking, guys. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'm not hitting something right, I'm working on the microphone situation and the technological side of things as well, so some upgrades will be happening soon. Stay tuned. God bless. Go Pokes. Love you all. Later.